everyone, it's Christine from The Door Doctor, and today we're going to be making what I hope will be a pretty quick and easy Valentine's Day flower wreath. For this video, we're going to be breaking it down as usual into 3 parts. We'll start with part 1, which is basically supplies, going through what you need to make the wreath. Part 2 will be forming your flower petals and attaching them to your wreath base. And then part 3 will just be finishing touches. So that's the flower wreath center, covering the back of your wreath, and getting it all ready to hang on your front door. All right, so part 1, in terms of supplies, I've decided to use 2 new types of mesh that I found on craftoutlet.com. I'll put the links to the actual mesh in the description box of the video, but it's this, I think they call it a snowball or snow fuzz mesh, but it has this sort of fuzzy texture to it. It's almost like a deco mesh in between. So I feel like it's like if felt was crossed with deco mesh, this is what you would get. And we're going to be using this pink, white, and red striped mesh. You'll need less than half a roll of this. These are 10-inch wide and 10-yard rolls that we purchase. And then this is similarly another fuzzy red, solid red mesh, okay? And we'll be cutting those into 10 by 10-inch squares for our petals. So that's the petals itself. We're going to be making 2 different types of petals. Both of them are folded. This one, almost like a tulip-shaped petal. And then the other type of petal we'll be making is more like a daisy petal with a little twist to it, okay? In terms of wreath base, I'm going to be making this on a 12-inch wreath frame today. These I purchased at Michael's. And for all my flower wreaths, you'll notice that I've sort of pre-prepared them by adding a piece of mesh in the center of the wreath so that you can place flower petals all the way to the center of the wreath. This is what's called number 5 plastic mesh. I purchase it in sheets. They're probably like 18-inch by 2-foot rectangular sheets that I purchase online at Hobby Lobby. I'll include that as well in the description box for this tutorial. So I've already pre-prepared my wreath frame, and that's what we're going to put our petals on. I have lots of 8-inch zip ties, so if you've watched any of my tutorials, you know that I use 8-inch zip ties to both form my petals and then attach them to the wreath base. You can certainly use shorter ones. If you prefer, I just like the 8-inch length. It's a little easier for my hands. And I also have some red ones. Excuse me, if you want to really hide your zip ties, you can get some color coordinating zip ties as well. I have a coordinating color of red felt. I've cut this to the size of my 12-inch frame, and that's going to cover the back of the wreath. I have a 12-inch long pipe cleaner that's going to form the loop to hang our wreath at the end. And then the flower center for today is going to be this little sparkly pink guy here. And so I've already pre-made this. I have a short tutorial that just goes through how I make this type of flower center. But essentially this is a foam base. So it's a 3-inch styrofoam. When you look at it online, they'll call them a half ball or a half dome styrofoam base. And then I've applied using my glue gun this sparkly material. This is glitter cording that I purchased online at Amazon. Comes in all different colors. And then on the back, I've already gone ahead and attached a little pipe cleaner with some glue and some felt to hold it in place. Okay, so you're going to need your flower center as well. The mesh, I used rotary cutters to cut on my cutting mat, so you don't need a wood burner for this. And then, of course, having some scissors to help along the way. And I think that's it for supplies. So I'm going to clear most of this out, and we're going to start making our petals. For the section where you're going to cut your mesh, again, you're going to cut 10 by 10-inch squares. In terms of quantity, we're going to be making 4 rows of petals for this flower. For the solid red, I would make, 22 of the red. It's always good to have a couple extra on hand, but my plan is 22. Sometimes I squeeze in an extra 1 or 2 to make it look, you know, more full. But that was the original plan is 22. And then for the stripe mesh, you're going to want 20, okay? 20 plus a couple. So there you go. We'll come back in a couple seconds with just the squares and we'll start folding some petals. All right, welcome back. So we're going to start folding our petals and we're going to start with making this tulip shaped petal here. Again, I've pre-cut all of my 10 by 10 inch squares with my rotary cutter. Doesn't have to be too precise because with this petal, all of your edges are going to be, you know, folded inward. There is a little fraying with this type of mesh, I will say, which is why I like using this for a folded petal. You kind of hide most of that. So what we'll do is, let me move that out of the way, is you're going to start with your square on the table with the curved edges going up towards the ceiling. And you're simply going to form a large triangle by taking this lower left-hand corner and meeting the opposite corner there. Okay. And then you're going to turn the triangle so that the long folded edge is facing you. And then I want you to take this lower left corner and you're going to fold it over, not to meet the tip of the triangle, but to sort of cross it. You want the tip here to be at about the same height as the peak of the triangle. Almost looks like a little wing. And then you're going to repeat it with the other base point of the triangle, okay? And then as you can see, it already starts to look like a little tulip. How tight you make this, how small the opening is entirely up to you. But it should look like a little crisscross here, a little crisscross there, and then the original peak of the triangle. Then you're going to flip it on its side, and then I usually just make 2 gathers, 2 pinches across right, I would say the base of this petal. So I'll do that again. So you have these little wings hanging here, and this is what I'm considering the base now. And you're just going to take 1, 2 pinches, okay? And that's where you're going to zip tie it, right where your fingers are kind of holding it. I'm going to use my white zip ties just so that you can see this better, but certainly you could use red ones, okay? And so then you're going to zip tie this, trim your zip tie, and then eventually you're going to cut off all of this extra portion down here at the base. That's petal number 1. We'll do that again. All right. So we're going to make our large triangle, flip it so that the folded portion is facing you. Take this lower corner, crisscross it up. Take the other corner, also crisscross it up. Make sure you like the size of that opening there. Flip it on its side and then gather it. Pinch it and then zip tie it. Okay. And sometimes you'll have a little bit of fraying down here at the base here, but you can trim that away. Let's see, let's do a striped color too. So same thing, cut sides on the side here, curve facing up, make your large triangle, flip it so that the folded portion is facing you. Take the lower left corner, or my lower left here, crisscross it, other corner, crisscross it. Make sure you like that shape. Turn it on its side, pinch it twice across the base, and then zip tie it. There we go. And then we'll do one more. And then we'll talk about numbers here. Make your triangle. 1 crisscross, 2nd crisscross. Gathered on the base and zip tie. So that's petal number 1. This is, you're going to make the majority of your petals in this shape. Okay. So for total numbers, all of your red petals are going to be in this shape. So that's 22 petals. For the striped mesh, you're going to make 12 and leave the remaining 8 to make a daisy petal. Bear with me while I'm getting my 3-in-1 cutting tool. So I've cut away the zip ties, and then I just usually like to trim this baseline portion of mesh using these 3-in-1 cutters. These are a handy tool you can also find on Amazon. Get rid of all the excess. All right. So those are the tulip petals. Again, you're going to do 22 in the red, 12 in the striped. Next, we're going to make this daisy petal. I'm going to hold it closer because you can see it has this nice little wave effect because I did a little extra fold there. We'll do that together right now. So these are going to be the 8 petals that are in the center of your flower that form that final inner row. So again, you're going to take your square, have the curved cut sides over here facing up. You're going to make a large triangle. Pretty easy. Turn it so that it's facing you. Then you're going to take this left-hand corner and bring it to meet the other corner, the other base of the triangle, if you will, and then fold that. Then I like to grab it, flip it. This side here opens like a book. Okay, so you're going to want to take this top portion and do just that. Fold it over, but only halfway. You don't fold it all the way over here. You just fold it halfway. And then you want to gather across the base here. So here's the peak of the petal. You're going to gather across the base here. I usually press down a little bit as I'm gathering, and I think I do three gathers there until it takes this shape on. And then again, you're going to cinch this at the base with your zip tie. There you go. We'll do that again. Do it a couple more times. So take your square, form a large triangle. Take that large triangle, fold it again up this middle portion. Then I like to take it, grab it, flip it. Here's your open side. You're going to fold that partially, about halfway. Almost looks like a little sail on a sailboat, I think. I don't know why. So fold it like that. Slide it onto its side so you can gather 1, 2, 3 pinches across the base, and then zip tie it. All right, and there's that. One more. Fold your large triangle, turn that large triangle into a smaller triangle by folding it again, grabbing it, flipping it, taking the open side, partially fold that, turn it to the side, then gather. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm just going to shape that a little bit more, make sure I have everything pinched the way I like it before I zip tie it. All right, and those are our 2 petal styles. So again, all the red, total of 22, are going to be in this tulip style. For the striped, you're going to be making just 12 in this tulip style, and then you want 8 for the middle of the wreath in the striped daisy petal style. All right, I'm going to finish making my petals. Again, have a couple squares on hand in case we decide to add a couple petals each row, depending on how she looks as we move along. But when we come back, we'll start placing our red petals on the outer row. All right, welcome back everybody. And now we're gonna get ready to apply our first row of petals to our wireframe base. And I have a mountain of petals over here. I'm gonna try to push off to the side so we can just focus on the red ones. And for this first row, you're going to apply, I believe, 12. And we're going to, since this wireframe is broken into 6 sections, we're gonna apply 2 petals per section. And you're going to want to apply it to this second wire, second from the outside wire. And the reason I said maybe 12 is if it looks a little sparse, we might squeeze a 13th in there just to make it look fuller. So the way I'm going to apply these, I'm going to take one of my zip ties. Again, I'm going to use white or clear ones just so you can see this better. But certainly you could use red color coordinating zip ties for this. And I'm going to apply 1 zip tie in each direction along the base of the petal. This is something I always do in the outer row of petals, and I'll tell you why. So if you use one zip tie and just use the one, the tendency is for the petal to go diagonally off to the side. Now you may want that appearance to your wreath, that's certainly fine, but by using a second zip tie going in the opposite direction, it'll pull the petal a little bit straighter, more perpendicular, if you will, to the wreath frame. And so I'm going to take a second zip tie, crisscross it basically with the first so that it pulls the petal a little straighter. I'll show you the back there. You can see that it's sort of a crisscross along the back. And that's what I do just for this first row. Obviously it uses more zip ties, but it gives it a little extra security in terms of placement. It's not going to budge, and then again it keeps it, I like it nice and straight. So we're going to work in a clockwise direction, and we'll place a couple more petals and then I think make a decision about the total number here. So we'll do one zip tie in this direction, one in the opposite direction. We're going to slide that next to the first. I just have this sneaking suspicion that I'm going to want more, more petals than what I've already cut. This sometimes happens. We'll see. So here's your second. And put that close. So we have 3 so far. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe a 13th petal will make its way. I'm just placing them so that they slightly touch. No reason to think you can't space them out a little bit. Let's see if we space them more like that. So there's 4 petals. I think I'll leave it at the 12. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crisscross my zip ties, apply the remaining 8 petals, and then when we come back, we'll similarly use the striped mesh for our next row. So you're going to need another 12. Be right back. All right, welcome back. And so I finished row 1. I did stick with 12 petals, and this is how she's looking so far. I really like this mesh. It has sort of a rich color to it with that little fuzziness, but the downside is it does seem to attract quite a bit of lint, just so you know, sort of a downside to this. Anyway, we're going to now start on row number 2, and so you're going to want your tulip-shaped striped petals, so 12 of those, and you're just basically going to place each one in between the base of the outer row. So 12 of them evenly spaced right in between the petals above it so that it sits, so that the point of this petal sort of sits in the valley, if you will, of the 2 red petals that are behind it. And we're going to place our zip tie right along the mesh for this row. So you'll find 2 petals and find a space right in between the 2, and you'll just work around the perimeter, placing petals that way. And we're only going to use 1 zip tie, right? So you don't need to use 2 here because the mesh keeps things pretty straight. And again, I'm going to work in a clockwise fashion here. Doesn't have to be perfectly in the middle of those red petals, but it certainly looks nice when it lines up nicely like that. And so it just sort of fills in any gaps in between the red petals. I think this is a pretty easy, quick design. What I like about it is you could certainly do this with any type of red mesh or pattern mesh that you like. If you have red poly burlap or red deco mesh, this would look cute. You don't necessarily need to have a striped mesh like I have. All right, so we're going to go through here, add a couple more. Again, this is going to be 12 total of the tulip-shaped petals. And I'll show you where placement of the petals ends up as well. Quick and easy. I like this one for that reason. It's the first 5. We'll do number 6 and then take a step back and see how she looks. I think all red would look lovely for the holidays too, for the Christmas holidays, but sort of missed the boat on that one. So let's see. Trim my zip ties. There's a couple little frayed edges here. We'll trim those. And then turn. It's hard getting this in camera view with how large the wreath is, but here we are. So the first 6, and when you move clockwise, you're going to layer one petal over. You know, the second petal will layer over the first, third over the second, etc. And so it gives almost like a little swirling pattern there. So I'm going to step away and finish the remaining 6 petals, and then we'll come back and do another row of the red tulip petals. You'll need your remaining 10 red petals for that. So row 2 is done. I'll let you get a look at that. I'll flip around so you can see zip tie placement right along the edges there on the mesh. And now we're going to move on to the next row, which is going to be 10 of the red. And usually you're not going to be able to place these perfectly in between the striped petals. So we're just going to place 2 across from each other and then fill in the space with the other 4 on this side, 4 on that side. So it won't be perfect. And I would say placement for the zip tie is probably a couple rows of squares in front of the cut edge of row 2's petal. Let me just see if I like that. Yep, that's about right. Place row 2 there. And I'll flip this over and let you see once I'm done where I ended up exactly placing that. So we'll do petal 1 there. Petal 2 will be exactly opposite. And then we'll fill in this blank section with 4 petals on each side. All right, there we go. And so we'll see if I can space these pretty equally. It doesn't have to be perfect here. But again, I'm working clockwise around and slightly overlapping the petals. So we got 1 there. We'll put number 2, I think. Let's see, I'll do that right there. And we should be able to squeeze a 3rd and a 4th here. Yep, it's going to be tight. My mountain of red petals is almost to none, which is good. Just going to trim these zip ties so I can see a little better, my little space there. And we'll place the last petal, or last petal on this side, right here. Make sure this lies over that. All right, that was pretty quick. So we have 6 petals so far. You can see how they kind of layer over each other. And then I'm going to fill in the last 4. And then, let me flip this around so you can see the placement of the zip ties. Probably about 1.5 inches to 2 inches in front of row 2. When we come back, we'll finish our petals by applying the 8 daisy petals. Okay, final row, row 4, we're going to be using our striped daisy petals. And in terms of placement, if you've watched any of my tutorials, I usually like to place typically, I didn't do it today, but typically I like to place petals first in quadrants of 4. So I'll place them almost, I think, of a clock or a compass. So north, south, east, west, or 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, so that everything looks balanced, and then I fill in the spaces. So that's what we'll do. Obviously, this only works if you have petals in 4s, so 4, 8, 12 petals in a row. So since we have 8 here, we're going to do that technique just to give some balance to the center of your wreath. So for the first petal, I'm going to place this about 1 plastic mesh row in front of row 3. So this will be our north. That's petal 1. I'm going to flip it around and place the opposite petal. So this will be our south, which I'm already placing off kilter here. Hold on. That's our south. And then east and west. You're getting really close to the center. So sometimes you're going to have a lot of overlap with the trimmed part of your petals. That's okay. The flower center should cover a lot of that. Should cover those zip ties. Sometimes though, it's nice to use, so I didn't use the red zip ties today, but using the red zip ties as you move towards the center is a nice thing to do, because then you can't see the white of the zip ties peeking out if the flower center does not perfectly cover them. So sometimes it's nice to have extra zip ties in whatever color you're using for that reason. All right, so I did my first 4, and now I'm just going to fill in these little spaces here with the remaining 4 petals. Not sure if they're going to overlap much, probably not. You could certainly, if you wanted them to, you bring everything a little bit closer to the center. I think we'll finish this row all together. Almost reminds me of a candy cane, the way it looks on camera here. A little bit of pink though. All right. And number 8. That in there. And go around, pull those all pretty tight. And then there is a little overlap, so I'm going to make sure they overlap in the same direction, if you will, as the last row. Let me just trim my zip ties. All right, get those out of there. Make sure there's no lint, all this little cotton. So there she is so far. I like her. I'm going to flip it around so you can see where the center zip ties were. Again, maybe 1.5 to 2 inches in front of row 3. And now all we have left to do is apply our flower center and cover the back of our wreath, put our hook on, and she's ready for hanging. So I'm going to clean off this table, come back with my felt circle, my red zip ties, my pipe cleaner loop, and of course my flower center, and we'll get to finishing off the wreath. All right, so let's finish our wreath. As I mentioned before, there's a separate tutorial for how I make these flower centers. You can purchase most of the material on Amazon, and really all is required is a little patience and a glue gun to glue this to the foam base. So here I'm just going to simply loop these pipe cleaner ends through 2 of my petals, flip it around, and give it a good twist. Tuck these ends in. You can clip them and tuck them. I'm just going to tuck them for now. All right, and there she is. And now we want to apply a loop for hanging, and I like to use pipe cleaners for this. I'll slide this out of the way so I can show you a little bit better. Basically what I do here is first I'll fold, this is a 12-inch long pipe cleaner. I fold it in half once, and then I fold each half in half, so that it makes what I think looks like a letter W, okay? And the peak of the W is going to be the top of your loop. So this middle part here is essentially the loop. that's going to be hanging. So you're going to take your wreath, flip it around. You're going to take the peak of this or the top of this W, slip it underneath the outer portion of the wire frame so that the legs of the W sort of get stuck, if you will. They get kind of stuck there. And then you're going to take each leg and wrap it behind the middle part of the W. One goes in one direction, the other goes in the other direction. Grab both the loop and the legs and pull in opposite directions so that it's nice and tight. I'm going to put this on its end because I'm running out of table space here. So you can see how that loop forms. And then these little legs, what are you going to do with those? So usually I'll wrap it around the wire frame once in front of the base of the loop, and then I just thread them underneath one of the inner pieces of the wire frame just to get them out of the way. So it looks like that. Sort of tuck them in there. All right. And that's all you need to do for your loop. And then covering the back of your wreath, I think this is always a nice idea because it looks neater and then it protects your door from any scratches, especially if you're giving this as a gift or you're selling them. You don't want to bang up people's doors. So I've already cut this circle to size, and I've clipped little tiny holes, or punched rather, little tiny holes with this cute little hole punch that is a Martha Stewart special. I don't think they make these anymore, but this is just a small, I think it's a 1/32, like 1/32 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch. Teeny tiny holes that are just big enough for zip ties to go through. So I've punched holes around the perimeter here, and I'm just going to snake my red zip tie under the wire frame, up through the little hole I punched, and zip tie that in place. And I've made probably about, I don't know, 10 holes around the edges here. And I just think it looks nice and neat. And again, won't scratch your door. And of course, if you have a window, like a door that has clear glass, and you're going to see the back of the wreath from the inside of the house, it's kind of nice to not have all the exposed zip ties in the wire frame. All right, so let's just work our way quickly around this. And again, red zip ties just because I think it looks nice. If you don't have them, no big deal. You could also glue your felt circle on. Might be a little less durable that way. A little messy, but to get it glued in place, but that's another option too. And then last one. So I usually zip tie these pretty lightly, and then I go around and sort of tighten them, clip them, and then tuck the cut edges. So the little cut edge of the zip tie can tuck right underneath your frame. All right, it's pretty good. All right, home stretch. All right, I got those all tucked in. Let's flip her around. Oh, and she's so cute. I really like her. So this is a really simple, I think pretty quick one that you could do for Valentine's Day. The color combinations are endless. Obviously, you could use any kind of red or pink mesh that you have lying around. So less than a roll for each color here. So if you were just using one color, you might need slightly more than a full roll, but still doable. Hopefully you like this tutorial. If you do, please hit subscribe. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.